She stopped. They'll know the suit is missing, a small voice said in the back of her mind. They'll know where you've gone. They'll come after you. Her breath was heavy and fast, her heart racing. The thing she'd been trying not to think for the last hours came to the front of her mind like an old friend. Fewer than 50 meters. It isn't far. You can make it. She closed the locker. The inner door of the airlock was open now. She launched herself toward it, forcing herself to pant, to hyperoxygenate. She couldn't tell if the dizziness she felt was from too much oxygen or a kind of existential vertigo. She was really going to do this, naked in the void. 50 meters in hard vacuum. Maybe less. Maybe it was possible. She couldn't depressurize first. The long seconds matching the airlock to the outer nothingness would take more time than she had. She'd have to blow it out. Full pressure to nothing in a fraction of a second. If she held her breath, it would pop her lungs. She would have to blow herself empty first. Let the void into her, all around her heart. Even if it worked, it would do her damage. She could handle that. Hey guys, Pete here. This is my breakdown of The Expanse Season 5, Episode 7. Naomi's time on the Pella has come to an end. The fears that brought her there proved warranted. Even though she was able to make some progress in connecting with Filip, his father's grip, the indoctrination, his wanting to please this larger-than-life figure that was his dad, things were stacked against her, and it was all too much for her to go up against, and now she has to say goodbye. That's where the title comes from, the Belter word for goodbye. And before we talk about everything that happened in this episode, I gotta give you a spoiler warning. If you're not caught up with the Expanse TV show through Season 5, Episode 7, then this video won't be for you. As someone who's read all the books, I will be referring to those, but I won't be talking about any future spoilers from them. With that out of the way, let's get started. The episode opens with a flashback. We see Naomi thinking about her life with Filip when he was a baby, before the first time she had to say goodbye. We see that they look happy, and we know this is before the Augustin Gomorrah, which we'll talk about in a minute. In his room, Filip's looking at his hand terminal, reading about the events of the slow zone and what happened on the Behemoth. Marco comes in, he wants to know what he's doing. Filip quickly clears the screen and talks about Palace. And Marco talks about that, talking about their humble beginnings, how they started there with nothing, and look at us now, basically. As they're talking, we get some insight into his manipulation. At one point, Filip says, "I want you to be proud of me." And Marco responds, "I know," rather than "I am." He asks his son if he can use the Chetzemoka, which Naomi gave him, because it's just an old junker and it doesn't really help the fleet. He says, "I know you've been spending some time with your mother," and he presents himself as caring by saying, "I didn't know if the ship had some kind of sentimental value for you." We see how Filip is 100% on board to please his father. He says it means nothing, and the look on his face says, "I'll do whatever you need me to do." That cuts to Marco going to see Naomi, and I think it stands out here. You see he approaches her with caution because he knows that she understands the way he operates a lot better than Filip would. He says he was actually impressed that she had the nerve to try and kill him. He brings up that it's been a long time since it's just been the two of them together, trying to get her to think about those good times before everything went wrong. And when this doesn't work, when she starts to push back, he says he just wants to know why she came back into Filip's life right now. They go back and forth where she says he forced her out of Filip's life, and he says he only hid him away because he wanted to make her come back to him. He never would have used her code to destroy the Augustin Gomorrah if he knew what would have happened between them. She knows he isn't being sincere, and she says that beyond regret, the other thing she felt was relief, because the pain of losing Filip was not as horrible as having to stay with him. And you can see that they're playing a game. They both have things that they can hold over the other person, and they're pushing each other's buttons. Marco has the clear advantage in the situation since she's on his ship. And what's really interesting is that his last statement is what they both want, but for the other person. Naomi wants to show Filip who Marco really is, and Marco says that he wants to show Filip who she really is. They also talk about why he hasn't killed her yet, which is interesting considering we know that he had already tried to when he told Sin and Filip to space her. So that underlines for us what she already knows, and that's that you can't trust anything Marco says. When the conversation ends, he lets her roam freely on the ship. She goes looking for Filip and finds his room empty. That gives her a chance to look around his room and get an idea of who he is. He comes in. They have a mother and son conversation where she says, "I miss so much of your life." He tells her he's been reading about what happened and what she did at the ring gates and how she saved a lot of Belters' lives. She tells him what happened with the Augustin Gamara and finds out that he already knows about it and thinks it was a great victory. And we see that he's reluctant to change his mind about being a fighter. It's what he's been taught. It's his identity. It's what he strives to be. He wants to be strong. He wants to be a fighter. And most of all, he wants his father's approval. There's a touching exchange where he lets his guard down and asks why she left him. She tells him she looked everywhere, she had to accept that she couldn't find him, and she tells him the story about how she almost committed suicide by throwing herself out an airlock. In the process of doing that, she realized that pushing the button wouldn't change anything, that her only choice was walking away, and she implies that his only choice is to walk away as well. So everything on the Pella is pretty emotionally charged. Things are a little more straightforward on the Rocinante. Holden and Bull are trying to locate the Zmeya. The question comes up about if they do find them, what are they going to do with the protomolecule? And Holden says that they're going to destroy it. Everybody seems to agree this is the best idea. And we learn that even though we just met Bull on Tycho this season, he's actually been working for Fred Johnson for a long time. This means he knows a lot about Fred, and he also knows a lot about Holden based on their association. Holden tells him that he never really trusted Fred, and Bull already knows this. In my preview video, I mentioned that Monica might turn out to be important in this part of the story, and it caught my attention that she said that she was reaching out to a source on Ceres with connections to the Inaros faction. She says if there's any chatter about a handoff, she'll hear about it. Definitely something to keep in mind considering how things turn out. Holden gets a message from Alex and finds out that he's burning towards Tycho. They figure out that he's close because of the short delay on the message. On the Razorback, we see that Avasarala is in contact with them. She says that Jupiter and Saturn fleets are pulling back to guard the inner planets, and that they've sent her the details about the ships that Marco has in the Free Navy. They also send these ship profiles to Holden. He sees the 9 different Mars warships, and he notices the Chetzemoka. Of course, he wants to go and help Naomi, but he realizes that the protomolecule sample is their priority. He asks Alex and Bobby to watch the Chetzemoka and tells them that Marco kidnapped Naomi. Alex promises that they won't lose the ship. Later, Holden and Monica talk. He comes clean about their sample and about how Naomi gave it to Fred in the first place, saying that she had good reasons to do so. Monica points out that there must be someone high up in the Martian military helping Marco get these ships. Seeing weapons and things like that on the black market is one thing, but getting ships is way more complicated. And she's convinced that the Martians either have his same political goals or they're getting something else in return, and she thinks it's probably Cortazar in the protomolecule sample. This seems like a really likely explanation, and when she asks why Marco took Naomi, Holden tells her about Filip and that whole situation. And he also says he got a message from her, but they get interrupted before we can find out what was in it. The Roci has located the Zmeya, and we get this really kick-ass battle scene when it tries to defend itself. It fires a bunch of torpedoes, and we get to see the Roci do this incredible roll with the PDCs going in all directions, taking out all of the torpedoes. They're able to do that with minimal damage. They lose one of the PDCs, and then Holden decides that he wants to board the ship rather than just destroying it. Bull and Monica both object, but Holden insists that they have to try to get answers from the crew and uses the railgun to disable it. They're planning to use their drones to board first in case it's booby-trapped, but the Zmeya self-destructs before they can. Now you might be wondering, what about the protomolecule? If they blew up the ship, did they also blow up the sample? My guess is probably not. It's possible that they could have passed it off earlier, but then also if you look closely, when the torpedoes are firing off, the last one looks different. Its exhaust is blue like it has an Epstein drive, and it seems to break in the other direction away from the Rocinante, and I think there's a pretty good chance that it might have been carrying the sample. To rewind a little bit, we saw Sin working on the Chetzemoka while it was docked with the Pella. When he comes back, we see him run into Naomi in the mess, and in a heartfelt exchange, he tells her he followed her when she went to the airlock to try to kill herself, and he breaks down telling her that he actually helped Marco hide Filip from her back in the day. He apologizes and explains that he thought it would bring them all back together. He tells Naomi he loved her, and he tells her that he loved all of them. He loved their whole crew, their whole family. And when he saw her on Palace earlier in the season, he thought it was his chance to make things right. She says that it could be, and she asks him to help her now. On the bridge, we see that Marco was following what was happening with the Zmeya. He says that they have their instructions and they know what to do. Sin comes in and Marco blames him and Filip, saying that it's their fault that everything's going wrong, and Sin pleads with him to let Naomi leave, and Marco doesn't want to hear anything about it. He says she's trying to take her son away from him, away from them, and he's never going to let her leave, and if Sin doesn't like it, then he can. We see Marco looking at charts on a monitor. We see that he's looking at where the UNN and MCRN ships are in the system. He's looking at the Soul Gate. We notice there are 2 UN ships and 1 from Mars that are kind of guarding it. Filip comes in and he tells his father that he wants to take command of one of their ships, that he wants people to know who he is. And Marco seizes on this opportunity to tear his son down. He points out all the things that have gone wrong and puts it on Filip personally, saying your weakness nearly undid everything we fought for. That's who you are. He says that the Belters are chanting his name and that basically Filip's nothing without him. He's his heir and someday he will lead the Belt, but not until after Marco's gone. And it shows us how Marco thinks of himself, how he thinks of this situation, how everything that goes right is because he planned it so well, and everything that's gone wrong has happened because someone else wasn't up to the task that he gave them. Serge comes to Naomi in her room and tells her that Marco wants to see her, and we see where all of this character stuff and all this setup was heading. He tells her that he has decided to let her leave, but not until after he uses her ship to lure in the Rocinante and kill her family. Once she's seen that, he'll put her on the float. He says that Filip inspired the idea, and in a really difficult scene, we see her reach out to him throwing everything back in her face, insulting her, literally hitting her, and just doing his father's bidding, wanting to be known as the person who took out the Rocinante. Marco frames this and everything we saw happen that was real between Naomi and Filip, between mother and son, as her trying to betray him. He basically undermines her credibility, and this is the culmination of his attempt to show Filip who his mother really is. As viewers, we know that she was being sincere and she was trying to help her son, but we see that he's in so deep here, and that his father's so good at using that to his advantage. At this point, Naomi knows that there's nothing she can do except walk away, and she's left to follow her own advice. The problem is that she has to make it look like she's going to commit suicide, because if she took a vac suit, the ship's systems will know it's missing, and then they would come looking for her. That's what she was contemplating in the excerpt I read at the very beginning of the video. The downside of this is that her son is going to think that what he did caused her to commit suicide. So it's a really impossible situation, and because the ships are separating and the Chetzemoka's leaving and this is her last chance, she makes the difficult decision and she goes to the airlock. Sin realizes this when he looks for her on the monitors, and he tries to intervene because he thinks she's trying to kill herself as well. He inserts himself into the impossible situation, further complicating things for her, and because this is the last chance she has, he becomes a sacrifice. We see that she's holding some of that hyper-oxygenated blood, like what we saw them give Monica when they saved her in the shipping container earlier in the season. We see that she was breathing heavy to oxygenate her own blood. She exhales as the door opens because if she hadn't, the air inside her lungs would have expanded with the loss of pressure. That could have killed her, and that's probably what killed Sin. I'm not an expert on these things, but I did look up what happens to a human body in hard vacuum when I first read the book, and it seems like the authors did their homework. When she launches herself, she would have something like 15 seconds until she would lose consciousness. And that's where the hyper-oxygenated blood comes in. I thought it was a great touch how you notice the red color around the edges of her vision as she reaches the limit. She jabs herself with the injector and is able to make it to the Chetzemoka, but while things look pretty peaceful out there, her body is being put through the ringer. She has no protection from the sun or solar radiation, so her skin would be getting an intense sunburn. Without external pressure, the water in her body would be vaporizing, and that causes the noticeable swelling. So it should go without saying that even though she makes it inside the other ship, she'll be feeling the effects of this for some time. She's definitely injured. We'll have to wait until next week to see what happens when she makes it inside, but we do know that the Chetzemoka has been put on autopilot with the intention of drawing the Rocinante to it. Alex and Bobby could find it, and they would be able to tell Holden where it is, but they'll all be falling into the trap that Marco has set for them. And that is where the episode ends. So really just a fantastic episode. I was curious as to how this would play out because so much of it happens in Naomi's head. All the planning, her getting ready, her making the decision that she has to do that. The show did a pretty good job of setting things up in a way that it made sense when she's standing there. Her interactions with Filip, Marco strategically and manipulatively setting things up so there's no way that she can get through to him. She may have been successful in planting some seeds there, but there was no way that she was going to get him to walk away from his father in the current situation. So the writing was good, it made it work, and the acting from all of them really took things up to the next level. It's a tragic situation for everyone involved, and we see how Marco uses everything he can to shift things to his advantage. It's an episode that was really heavy on character stuff. I kept wanting to cut things out to make it shorter when I was writing the recap, but everything was so important. Amos had his episode where we really got deep into where his character's going, seeing him realize that he needs to get back with his crew, and I'm glad that they took as much care here with Naomi. Watching her putting herself through that physically, making the decision to leave her son behind, knowing that he'll think he's partly responsible for what happened, all so that she can try to save her family on the Rocinante. It's a defining moment for the character. It was crafted so well, and it was so gripping to watch. They really did pull it off. We didn't get any Amos and Clarissa or any drummer at all in this episode. But overall, I thought the balancing here worked better now that all the stories are kind of headed in the same direction. Just a brief scene with Avasarala talking with Alex and Bobby, but in that we know that she's finding out more about what's going on, that she knows the Free Navy's flying around in Martian ships, and even though we only see a little bit of Alex and Bobby, the scene where she finds the bullet is fun, and through the communications with Holden, we know they're all going to end up in the same place soon. Holden's got himself a temporary crew, and I like the way these characters work together. They're giving Bull some depth. Monica seems to be putting together an idea of what the big picture might be. Holden not pulling the trigger, not following through with destroying the protomolecule right away, makes you wonder what he was thinking. But it is possible that that was more about Naomi and trying to find her, like he said. And the battle scene was just a lot of fun to watch. So I like where we're at. I'm excited to think about where things are going. And in a few days, I'll put up another video where we'll talk about that. And I think this is a good place to leave things because I really want to hear what you guys think in the comments. So let me know what you're thinking. Pretty emotional episode. We're getting some great development of the crew members on their own. And they're all feeling that separation and trying to get back together. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Let me know what you're thinking. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.